Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another edition of the Triple Peak Fiction Podcast. I am your host, King Recon, potentially with an underscore in the middle, and today we are here to discuss something very near and dear to my heart. A series that was a part of kickstarting this entire venture that allowed me to come here to eventually start doing YouTube and meeting these two wonderful individuals. Starting us off, we've got my dog, who of course has been preaching the Bleach greatness for the past like 4 or 5 years, in regards to the absolute the incredible amount of content he's producing, not just on Twitter but also on YouTube, especially with the latest video. In regards to the eyes and greatness, my boy Fiji. Hey Radman, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Pleasure to be here with the both of you again, and I'm just very excited to talk about some greatness. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. And then, of course, we got my guy coming in strong every Wednesday and lately Friday for the Bleach days, man. And it was such an incredible journey seeing you read the entire series. I unfortunately was not able to make it past the Mayuri fight, so one of these days I'll definitely have to watch the rest of the VODs, but that's why we're here today, to discuss your thoughts there on the end and the series as a whole. The good brother, my guy AJ. How's it going, man?
Great. Thanks so much as always. Really super excited. I've been looking forward to this for ages, to talk about it with both of you, even though I've kind of every week talk about it with Fiji already, but just to have this sort of discussion, now that it's all done, that I've seen it all. I haven't seen the last core of the anime, the most recent core of the anime, but I've seen enough so that we can properly talk about everything. And it was just such a special journey, and I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts on it and to just gush about it.
Yes, sir. And I guess we might as well just hop right into it. Like I said, as someone who missed out on those last couple of streams, and I saw how high my boy Ichigo was on your favorite protagonist list.
Yeah.
I just want to get your thoughts on that final stretch and the series as a whole, now that you've had time to process the ending.
I absolutely adored it. It was so incredible in so many ways. Like, once you hit a certain point in Thousand Year Blood War, I feel like it's just, looking back on it, it's crazy to see what happens back to back to back. Like Mayuri, Nemu, Shunsui, Yugram, Baz. Like, I don't even know what order. I think it's out of order, the way that I'm saying it, but like the stuff back to back to back that you just consistently get, that's payoff for things that I was anticipating for hundreds of chapters. Just it was overwhelming. It's such an assault on the senses and the emotions, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I really, really love the final stretch, and it pretty much solidified that it's my favorite arc overall. And I kept saying throughout the journey that literally, like, everything was going so well, everything was perfect, but I said, literally the one thing I need is I need Aizen to have something like monumental, because you can't just reintroduce him, have him go through this parallel journey with Ichigo, and have him come back and be this great foil to Yuha, and then not have him do something huge. Like, there's no way. I would be really disappointed if he didn't have a huge part to play, and then he did, and it was better than I imagined. So I was more than satisfied. It was so special, and with all said and done, it made me look back on the series incredibly fondly, which I would have done anyways, but just appreciating it as this really, out of the three, because I've done all three big three now. Well, I'm up to date with One Piece, as the most unorthodox story, but that made this one just so much fun to dig into in a different sort of way, and sort of kind of challenge myself, discuss things in a different way, think about the manga medium in a different way. So it was just a totally beautiful experience, and I loved it so much.
I have to thank you for not only having the Bleach greatness that was presented so many different individuals, maybe even for the first time. But now people are forever going to associate Bleach with Alley of Silence, and I truly appreciate you for that. So thank you for thank you for pushing the Trails agenda. You know what I'm saying on stream.
I've started playing that song when I reread the end of Fullbring now. I can't reread the end of Fullbring without Alley of Silence.
You can't separate them. It's that was a beautiful coincidence.
Yeah. But yeah, on that very same topic, are there any like standout things from the 1,000-Year Blood War, since you said that now it's solidified as your favorite, that really just whether it was a particular battle, a moment, a sequence that really stood out to you, and on courage. If there's anything that you would like to discuss in regards to like a really standout piece from the overall portrait of 1,000-Year Blood War that allows you to really think back on the entire thing fondly.
It's so hard to narrow down because of how much there is, but I mean, the last 6 to 8, maybe 10 chapters or something was just totally incredible. The things that made me, if I had to narrow it down to three things, it would be Aizen having the final monologue or final lines of the series and the sort of exclamation point thematically of the series, and how beautiful that is, and how much that is so elevating for him and Ichigo and their dynamic in the series as a whole. So that is something that that is one of the biggest highlights of the whole series, not even just the arc for me, is Aizen's courage speech. But then in addition, a couple of other things is just Ichibei as a character threw me for this insane, crazy loop. I lost sleep over him. I still lose sleep over him. I read one line from Can't Fear Your Own Worlds, and it makes me rethink everything about him again. And then I wonder what his place is in the narrative. I do these, like, I think of him in incredibly like strange, abstract, pretentious ways. Like, people ask me if he's an antagonist, and I say no, because he's the writer. He's above the story. He's beyond the story. So I can't put him in a role in the story. Like, this guy ties my mind in knots. So Ichibei to me is one of the biggest takeaways from the whole series as well. And then, if for a third one, I'd say the Kenpachi Unohana fight. I don't even know if it's my favorite. I don't even know if it's my favorite in the arc, but it's the one that threw me for a loop the most with how unexpectedly beautiful and hard-hitting it was. I knew that Unohana would be a great character given the sort of gradual build-up she had to something. I could not in my wildest dreams could have imagined it to be as complex and emotionally resonant and impactful and rich as it was, and how it just solidified Kenpachi and Ichigo as having this unbelievable parallel journey, and formed this amazing dynamic with Unohana and Masaki, and what mothers mean in the series and all that. So if I were to narrow it down to 3 things in the arc, it would probably be those 3, but that's only because you metaphorically had a gun to my head, because then I'd say like 20 other things.
No, I appreciate that. On that same thought in regards to that particular battle, just on a personal note, I have like these things in all of my favorite stories that will be like these certain sections that I always revisit, just because it sort of encapsulates why I love the entire thing and really represents a good portion of my thoughts and feelings over just everything about it. And that would be like, for example, in One Piece, like Jaya, I think sort of encapsulates a lot of what makes that series special. And in Bleach, the one that I've come back to so many times is that stretch between Kenpachi versus Unohana up until the end of chapter 542, with everything but the rain in the middle, obviously, and then Ichigo, the legendary reveal, and then him getting his 2 blades. With the blade is me. That stretch really does capture Bleach well, and obviously because there's so much payoff there for things we want to see the entire series. But I feel like just by itself, Anytime I go back and revisit, I'm like, yeah, this is why I love Bleach. Like it really is, and it's not even. I don't even know if it's my favorite part of the series because the ending is so godly, but like that stretch is just so special to me.
It's so sorry, and I have to do a fourth because Blade is Me is the epitome of everything I've been waiting for Ichigo for the entire series. I don't know. I think it's really hard to rank stuff in Bleach, but Blade is Me is everything I've been wanting to. I was waiting for throughout the whole series, the proper self-actualization. So that I have to add that as the fourth as well.
Nice.
It was unbelievable.
Fiji, I'm gonna open the floor for you for this next one. Is there anything in particular that you want to bring up in regards to either the 1,000-Year Blood War or the spin-off material?
I'll probably focus on the manga with 1,000-Year Blood War. I think 1,000-Year Blood War is such an interesting arc for the whole series because one thing I find interesting is that Kubo only considers there to be 4 arcs in the story. He combines Substitute Shinigami and Soul Society. In one interview, he basically says there's the Rukia arc, the Orihime arc, the Chad arc, lol, and then the Uryu arc.
I love that.
Soul Society, Arrancar, Fullbring, and the 1,000-Year Blood War. 1,000-Year Blood War, I think one reason why the first invasion is probably the most iconic or beloved section of the story besides like parts of Soul Society is because it completely flips the formula. The way that arc starts off, there's no other arc like it. There's no other section of the story like it structurally. And you were just talking about the first invasion, of course, the aftermath of it. But for me, that's probably the section I visit most is just from the start of the arc, from 480 to 542. Besides the final volume, that's the section I probably visit most as like a definitive stretch. And I think the first invasion, it's so difficult to discuss 1,000-Year Blood War with people because it starts so high, it starts so strong. Sorry, I worded that wrong. Not discuss it with people, but when you're reading the arc, it's kind of like, how will it ever reach this level again? I feel like that's something a lot of people feel when they're reading that arc. And I do think Second Invasion is a slight dip below, but that's why I'm so grateful for that final third of the arc because it matches it and arguably surpasses it in some regards. So, yeah, First Invasion is very special to me. I just wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, no.
There was something else I also wanted to say. Because you missed the final streams, I wanted to let you know. I kind of tried to design the stopping points for the weekly streams in a way that for the final stream, it would start with the Yoko sort of moment with Aizen.
Oh yeah, you were telling me that.
So the final stream was just 5 chapters, but it was those 5 chapters. So
those 5 chapters.
It ended up being as long or longer than a normal 10 chapter stream. So I wanted to tell you that. I forgot I actually already told you that. So
Fiji's stopping points had me. He had me really sweating about if Aizen was going to come back in right before the final.
I really appreciate that because those final 5 chapters, bro. It's like like AJ was saying earlier. You're waiting this entire arc from the moment I believe it's chapter 616 reintroduces Aizen back into the narrative. You're like, oh my god. Our boy's back. Like, what are we gonna do? I was already sweating. Obviously, chapter 510, 511 has like Juha talking about the fact that he was late because of Aizen, and then we actually got to see him in 616. So we're like, all right, bro. Like, what is he gonna do here? And obviously, we saw him cooking earlier in the arc, but we all wanted to see the interaction between him and Ichigo at some point. And to have that be the welcome to my soul society, the Aizen and Juha, and then eventually it's like the heart and soul of the series there. Ichigo and Aizen versus Juha, and what is like one of the coolest final battle sequences ever. And then when you dig into it, it really does spell out exactly, or not even spell out, I would say it paints exactly what the series has been going for the entire time, and obviously it culminates with the incredible courage speech that sort of encapsulates what truly makes Bleach special. And I have so much love. Ichigo and Aizen, I'm sure this isn't is similar for a lot of people, but they truly are my two favorite characters in the series, and it's for maybe a lot of the similar reasons as other individuals may have, but it's just it's something that I continuously look back on from the moment that I finished the Soul Society arc, and I saw the little interactions between the Ryoka boy and Aizen as he went up into the heavens, and just to see how all of that led into Dayside, and then led into the entire journey that we would see Ichigo go on, and to see how everything concluded with those two characters once again, and ultimately with Aizen there in the end. It's just the series could not have wrapped up any better. And I'm so glad that Kubo, even though I am sure towards the end there must have been things he was like, man, if only I would have had just a wee bit more within the Dongai, where he could have cooked in regards to his own personal thing, as now we're seeing that he wishes to do. Even though I separate the anime and the manga, I think the manga is an incredible experience in and of itself, because that's a representation of who Kubo was at that point in time. But we know that he was dealing with depression and things of that nature, and so to see that someone who was dealing with depression and things of that nature back in Fate Karakura Town, seeing that seep into the Fullbring arc, and then exploring that through Ichigo's character in both the Arrancar Saga and Thousand Year Blood War, for the ultimate final message of the series to be courage, feels like something that he himself discovered, similar to what Hideaki Anno discovered at the end of Evangelion. And so it's a really, really, really special thing to look back on those final 5 chapters with context of who Kubo is as an individual. And Fiji, if you have any interviews or anything like that, I would absolutely love to hear if Kubo's ever talked about his thoughts in the ending or anything of that nature. But it truly is something really, really special to me, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Fiji.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say I'm glad AJ enjoyed it too.
Oh, yeah. No, I loved it. Like, cause the thing is, I think there's definitely it's not a tied up in a nice bow, perfect sort of ending. There tends to be, for a lot of my favorite series, like endings that are everything's clean, everything's really polished, and everything just feels kind of perfect, you know? To me, the end of Naruto is very much like that, or the end of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, or something like that. Whereas Bleach, there are definitely things where I just go, I could have had a bit more of this, I could have had a bit more of that, I would have liked to see this character do that, but in the grand scheme of things, they're so minor compared to what I take away from it, the highs in general. And you were mentioning Kubo's health situation and all that sort of thing, and because people are so, like, people like Fiji, people in my community and stuff, were so forthcoming with a lot of information about Kubo as he was writing and his struggles and that sort of thing. I was aware of that even before reading the series. I was aware to an extent. But even if I didn't know, I feel like I would have felt it. Like, I would have felt something to that degree, because I think that through the design and presentation of Bleach, almost more than any other series I've seen, it's hard to think of a series that does this to a greater extent. I think Kubo communicates wordlessly with the viewer, with the reader, with the audience, his feelings on so many things, on narrative, story, the purpose of a writer, the sort of legacy of a story, the sort of ego of a writer, and then certain things to do with health as well, health and struggle and perseverance. So, like, I think that through a lot of this stuff, I felt a lot of what Kubo was feeling himself, or what he was trying to get across, without it being explicit at all. And with that all culminating with courage, makes me feel, not only does it tie up the series really perfectly, in a way that I didn't really envision. But it makes me feel closer to him as an artist, and that is something I really. It's not a necessary thing for my favorite stories, but it's a hell of a nice bonus whenever I feel that with stories. Whenever I feel like a kinship or an intimate connection with the writer bearing their soul to the reader. It's something I haven't experienced much. Like I think I get it in pieces with Haikyuu, with Eva, like you said, with Hunter x Hunter and Umineko, stuff like that. But it's extremely rare for me to feel that, and so it was so awesome to, I guess, get that inherently through the presentation.
Yeah, no, it's it's sort of like the feeling that you get whenever you turn on Kingdom Hearts for the first time. You hear "Dearly Beloved." It's something. It's very hard to explain, but you can tell. You can sort of see like the mental state of the creators as they were creating this thing, plastered out into the portrait that would become like that main menu screen that resonates with so many people, because we've all felt that inexplainable feeling. I feel like Bleach really captures that really well. Especially, I've talked about this countless times before, but when Ichigo was struggling what he was struggling with in the Arrancar saga, I couldn't explain why I resonated with that so much as a teenager, but I like now I understand why I was able to resonate with that so much as a teenager, and even still as an adult. It's some really powerful stuff. But as going over and looking at the entire thing as a story, I wanted to kick this question to both of you, because this is something that interests me so much. I know we've talked about this before in regards to the way that Bleach is structured. I'm so glad Fiji just brought it up in regards to the way that Kubo himself looks at the story, because I genuinely do believe that Bleach is like, if Kubo was a musician, he would have 4 albums, and those 4 albums are exactly what he just said, exactly what Fiji just said. The Substitute Shinigami and Soul Society, Arrancar, Fullbring, and Thousand Year Blood War. And so what I wanted to ask the two of you is, how do you feel about the way the series is structured, in regards to that allowing it to, like AJ was just talking about, in regards to taking full advantage of what Kubo wanted to say with this story through those 4 arcs? And do you how do you feel overall as a whole about the discography of Bleach, the entire whole of Bleach, and how he differentiates / keeps things consistent through each arc? So just how do you feel about the way this story is structured?
I love the music references, because, you know, Kubo's huge on music himself, with, you know, the musical motif in some chapter titles and how he writes things. Like the very first chapter of Arrancar is titled "Trigger for a New Concerto." So it's like that is there. But what I think one of my favorite things about this kind of structure is the interplay between them. Like they all, obviously the first one can't comment on it, but like by the time you get to Thousand Year Blood War, it feels like it's commenting on all 3 prior ones. And coming into like that whole structure with the 4 arcs is, I think there's another structure that works in tandem with that, which is that I like to view Bleach as a collection of short stories or individual stories that funnel into Ichigo's main story. Like you have, like, for example, Shunsui's stuff in Thousand Year Blood War is very subtly woven throughout Soul Society and Arrancar. It's not direct, but there's little build up for that. Mayuri's stuff is the same. Soul Society and Arrancar works towards it, and it comes full circle by the time we get to Thousand Year Blood War. Kenpachi's the same. So I'd say there's probably like 8 or 9 roughly like main characters, quote unquote, with their own little casts of their own, with their own antags of their own. Which obviously like speaks to the greater framework of the arcs they're in, their content speaking to that, but also their own little stories that come to a close in the Thousand Year Blood War, which is another reason why I love that arc so much. But yeah, when it comes to the 4 arcs, I love how each of them sort of have their own distinct identity, whether it be aesthetically, like the style of title drops is different in every arc. For Fullbring, they're overlapping objects or buildings because of the Fullbring power system. In Thousand Year Blood War, it's just big blocky text. In Arrancar, it's a bit different.
Yeah.
Soul Society doesn't really have them as much. But I like how that changes every arc. The art style itself changes every arc. Not massively, but there are some pretty noticeable changes with the art. And, of course, each arc has its own overarching theme that ties into the antagonist usually, that's spearheaded by the antagonist, and ties into the power system that is part of that arc. Like, you have Arrancar power system, Fullbring power system, Quincy's and their Shrifts. It just kind of feels like, to me, it's kind of like Kubo told the same story 4 times with some pretty fundamental differences, but it's very iterative. Like, it's like they're different iterations of the same thing. And he's doing the same thing again with slight differences to comment on that thing. And that's why you do get some complaints like, oh, Arrancar is Soul Society 2.0. But that's like, obviously that's wrong, firstly. But secondly, there are some pretty big similarities between the two. But that just makes me love them more. Because it makes prior content better while like making the newer content just have this extra dynamic, this new layer to it for you to view things from. And I do think Kubo's very good with making things feel fresh and original, even though he is constantly commenting on prior stuff. So, yeah, he strikes a great balance for me, and the structure is a big part of that.
I absolutely love that. Before you go, AJ, just before I lose the thought, I apologize.
No worries.
I absolutely love that. What you were just talking about in regards to the repetition aspect of it, because that's one of my favorite parts about Bleach as well. And one series that obviously has been iterating upon itself while also still staying true to exactly the structure / similarities that each one have with each other is JoJo. JoJo from part 3 up until right now they're all structured almost exactly the same. But the things that are said in there and how they iterate upon the previous parts, how it iterates upon what the author's been trying to say at different stages in his life, while also still delivering a similar type of story in each and every single time. It allows the repetitive nature of it to truly feel like it's an intentional part of the piece to allow you to reflect on not just the similarities and differences, but how it makes you feel in relation to the stuff that's surrounding it. As like you were saying, the interplay of how Fullbring feeds into this, or how Arrancar Saga could feed into this. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, because the repetitive nature of so many stories is what allows them to truly be brilliant. It's that loop that truly makes them genius. And I feel like Bleach definitely has that within it, and it's worth commenting on in this discussion, because it is one of my favorite aspects of it as well. So thank you for commenting on that. I apologize, AJ. Go ahead.
I thought you were gonna.
I had to say that.
Nice.
Did you want to say something else, Fiji?
Yeah, very quickly. I thought you were gonna mention One Piece, because One Piece is
Yes.
This is one like big similarity, I think, because they're pretty different overall, I think, but I think this is one big similarity between One Piece and Bleach, is some arcs are structurally like designed to call back and iterate on previous ones.
Great point.
Yeah.
Spitting.
Yes, what I was gonna say is basically very similar to what both of you were saying. But with one more thing with regards to the repetitive nature, or the sort of circular or cyclical writing structure, is that it's integrated with so much of what's important to the story. Because I think the story, kind of how Fiji said, there are 8 or 9 main. You could argue there are 8 or 9 main characters, and I think a lot of those main characters. And even characters who are a bit more peripheral but still very important, it's a big journey of self-actualization and discovery for a lot of them. And I think it's very genuine, as long as it's done in a way that keeps the story entertaining and engaging and fresh and rich. But I think it's very sort of kind of ingenious. that the story structure reflects a lot of what that journey is, of self-actualization and self-acceptance and like a coming of age properly internally, because that's how it is a lot of the time. In real life, in these stories with a lot of these characters, it is very cyclical. You feel like you make progress, but then it's kind of like two steps back, and then it feels like there's this huge ascent, but there's something wrong about that, and then you're back to square one. You know, Ichigo loses his powers after a quote-unquote victory in a Rancor, and he is completely lost. Doesn't really know what to do with himself. He doesn't feel like he has as much of an identity as he did. When he has this seemingly triumphant moment against Aizen, it feels off, and he's back to square one despite gaining all this strength. Kenpachi, been in the doldrums forever, tasting kind of what he wanted, but never really reaching that breakthrough until the fight with Uno. Well, he got a taste of it with fights with Ichigo, for example, but he didn't get unlocked until that fight with Unohana. And so, like, you could do that with 6, 7, 8, like 15 other characters about this sort of circular one step forward, two steps back, really monotony of what it means to properly grow. And I love that that's sort of captured. There's a synchronicity between the structure and style and what the characters go through. And a lot of times with that sort of praise or that sort of observation, the criticism would be, okay, yeah, it sounds great on paper, and yeah, that's smart, I guess, but it needs to be a story that's entertaining and engaging regardless. Luckily, it's Bleach's all of that and more the entire way through. So Kubo needed to, I think Kubo thought that out, and he just needed to make it so that those differences and the structure and everything that the characters go through is really engaging. And to me, that element of it only gets better and better throughout the series. Just one last thing is that with regards to the, I guess, tone, despite it being kind of, despite it being cyclical, what I really like about those 4 sections of the story you mentioned is that they have a slightly different tone to me that builds on itself. Like, I think up till the end of Soul Society, there's tons of melancholy and like strange sadness and introspection. And I think Arrancar dials that up even more, but adds just this extra element of tragedy and longing through a lot of the psychologies like Ulquiorra. But also I think it offers a bit of an ascent, a little bit of a hint of an ascent through, again, like Ulquiorra's conclusion, for example. And then Fullbring is just a complete, it's a complete 180. It's completely emotional. It's brimming with insane hope and love everywhere in a way that is very stark. And then I think Thousand Year Blood War sort of brings that all together. I think it offers you the emotion, the outward emotion of Fullbring, but builds upon the melancholy that had been dwelling in the series and doesn't lose sight of it, because that's, I think, a big part of the identity, and kind of just brings it all together. So I also like how it tackles that sort of tone, I guess, and the emotional approach.
Yeah. Thousand Year Blood War feels celebratory in a way, among all the other things it is. But it does feel like a celebration in some regards, similar to the second half of Fullbring, which is... It's a mix, because obviously he's striking a fine balance between Ginjo's very tragic content alongside Ichigo having this beautiful, like, celebratory moment. But to speak to what you were saying on synchronicity, like between the characters having these cyclical journeys and how that's reflected in the structure of the story, I adore how that is tied into the ending, because Ichigo is obviously given this choice. Well, not given this choice, but Yuha is in front of him saying, I can end this cycle once and for all. I can end it. You won't have to take these steps backwards only to try to get forward again. And he just says no, and he chooses to keep going on this never-ending cycle of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, whatever it may be. I love that about it. And just even how there's like the inverse is also true in a way, because the final chapter is of course the exact same title as the first chapter, so it is still a cycle that is kind of being broken in a way. So it works both ways, as is most things in Bleach. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. Whenever you were saying what you were just saying, Fiji, it was reminding me of I think we had a similar discussion with the Naruto. Whenever we were talking about Naruto, about how like that series handles the cycle and how that seeps into so many different parts of its narrative, and that's definitely something that, as both of you have just put out, that that's something that something within Bleach that you can find within everything, from its characters to its structure to its story. It's incredible how deep it is a part of Bleach. Before we get into the incredible chapter 687, I do have a specific question I want to ask both of you, but in regards to a character that obviously I have a lot of love for. But she most certainly is a character that I feel like deserves a look into, especially now that we have the full picture with potential stuff to come. Now that if we do get a continuation to Bleach with the incredible 687, and that is Orihime. I wanted to ask both of you how you feel about Orihime throughout the course of the story. Someone that I know all three of us have a lot of love for, but why is it that you feel Orihime works as well as she does for Bleach, and your overall like personal connection to said character in regards to why it is that she works, and anything that you may have to say about this character. I'm just for my own personal curiosity, maybe not for the audiences, but for my own personal curiosity, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts, both of your thoughts.
I will say one thing. There's so many things I could say, but one thing about Orihime that I adore, and I think is that she provides to the greater story, is that she gives us a different take on what AJ was talking about with self-actualization, because this is a battle manga, and most characters, their growth usually coincides with their growth in power, but that isn't the case for Orihime, and it's approached from a completely different angle. It's purely just about mental barriers, and it's also about Ichigo, and like the where his story is at, and how their self-actualization is intertwined, how it has to kind of happen together. But yeah, that the fact that her journey is not about her becoming a stronger combatant, but just about her overcoming her trauma in different ways. Not to say that it is about becoming a stronger combatant for others. That's just usually the way in which it's explored. But with Orihime, it's explored through her just being able to smile genuinely. Like 1,000-Year Blood War is probably the arc where we see her smiling genuinely the most, even though she doesn't really have that much content in it compared to other arcs. It's still the one where, even though it's the stakes are higher than they've ever been, and it's this crazy war, she's able to be happier than she ever has been before, and obviously that culminates in the beautiful moment that I kind of view as the culmination of her character arc, with her walking up the steps. But obviously we have something after that as well that's just as important, which is her seeing the Horn of Salvation,
Yes.
and the callback to the Vastor Lord moment. Yeah, Orihime, it's hard. I don't know where to begin. That's the first thing that came to mind. I love how she stands out in that regard. Yeah, she's not like a Kenpachi or a Toshiro or an Ichigo. She's more like a Shunsui, I'd say. She's more like Shunsui's kind of similar in that regard, where his self-actualization is about, it's deeply intertwined with another, and it's about overcoming mental barriers.
I love it. It's a great answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that, and I love how it's that same again, you can look at a lot of the character arcs and see them being very similar, but hers, while being similar in ways to Ichigo's or a lot of these other characters, and her progress towards proper, I guess, fulfillment and becoming what she wanted to be at the beginning of the series, and all of that. It's beautiful, but done in a way that is very loyal to the type of person she is. She's not fighting, and I think that would have been strange if she was fighting and found that out about herself and got to that point in the way that would work for other characters, but that was never who she was. So I really loved that element to it as well. In general, I think Orihime actually hits a lot of points that I love about Aerith Gainsborough.
I'm so glad you brought it up. Yes.
Fiji's currently going through remake, so I won't get into spoilers about the plot or anything. But what I love about both these characters is that they are this unbelievable support to everyone around them, and they are this insane light and this sort of bridge, or this way of all these characters for feeling heard. Like Aerith has gone through what a lot of people have gone through, and so she can lend an ear and relate to other people and validate their pain and suffering and grief and sorrow and whatever, and say like, yeah, this sucks, but also offer a way forward. I think very similar to what what Orihime does in Bleach. And so that, along with just her general presence and energy and light, just makes her very warm and endearing and lovable and adorable and just a joy to have on screen for me, on the page. But also, that sort of character for me can have a bit of a limit, or a lower ceiling, if they don't have genuine human nuance. And I think Orihime and Aerith, both of them, very much do. Like, they have little rough edges that are a bit gray, a bit strange, or a bit like they're not paragons. So, for example, Orihime kissing Ichigo with Goodbye Halcyon Days, or feeling this immense envy at Rukia being able to support him in the way that she wishes she could but feels unable to. And how that all, and the way that she and Ichigo just aren't able to communicate properly a lot of the time in the earlier parts of the series. And all these things, those really human nuances and rough edges help her essence feel more human, more gratifying, and just make her four-dimensional to me. And the last thing I think I'd say about her is that I mentioned the idea of mothers and how it's one of my favorite thing in Bleach. It's one of my favorite thematic elements of Bleach. To me, Orihime is a huge part of that. And obviously, roles aren't mutually exclusive. As much as Orihime ends up being Ichigo's partner and all of that, I think she very much is a warm motherly presence for him as well, and other characters throughout the series, in a way that kind of comforted me a lot of the time. And I really love her being this element that is constantly present for that, because I think Masaki is there all the time, but you don't really feel it until retrospectively you know her role in the story, I guess, upon reread and stuff like that. But Orihime is always there, and is a constantly important character in the grand scheme of things. So I think she lent that element, that motherly element, in a more palpable way than other characters I'd attribute that to, like Unohana or Masaki, who I guess do it in a more abstract way. So I really like that about her as well.
Mother of Flagnards, man. So I was gonna say something, but AJ said it, so it works out so well. I'm glad you brought up the lens of Aerith, because the thing that stood out to me the most the first time I watched Bleach, and now especially going through it all so many times throughout all these years, really is how like the Rukia Orihime and Ichigo triad reminds me so much of the Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith one, that I appreciate obviously so much for similar and or different reasons. But that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring up Orihime, is because I've had a lot of opportunities to discuss almost all of my favorite characters in Bleach, but I feel like I almost never get to truly talk about the greatness that is Orihime Inoue, because she truly is a fantastic character. And from like the very beginning of the series, I'll never forget the episode 2 and 3 mini arc that she had with her brother that really sucked me into the story up until the very end. And of course that brings us into the seed that she and Ichigo brought into this world that's about to be a true a true exploration of so many different elements that Kubo has been interested in, and we've seen him discuss, and now we're going to be able to see all of that take place with what is about to potentially happen from chapter 687 onwards. And I want to obviously bringing this up to both of you. Fiji, obviously, that both of us have had 4 years to process exactly what's taking place within that chapter. I can't believe it's been 4 years. And AJ, who just recently read it, for maybe what could be of this one day. I'll push the floor over to you, Fiji, first. Obviously, thoughts on 687, maybe on its own or in relation to everything else in the series, but also for excitement for potential future stuff as well, considering how awesome of a first chapter that was, if that's really the start of a new arc.
It's Kubo is a madman for dropping that on us and just going radio silent for 4 years. He's working on the anime, I'll give him that, but yeah, he's a madman for that. For the one shot, crazy. I don't know where to begin. I'll say one thing that really interests me about it is that balance has been broken. The current shape of the world has been broken. Hell is leaking into the rest of the world, and now that the main, like what the main story of Bleach was about is complete, like the whole self-actualization of Ichigo and many others, now that they've had their 10 years of peace, obviously it's not fully complete, as we were just saying, the journey never ends. That's kind of the point of the ending, but it's 95% there, you could say.
Yeah.
Because of that, I hope the scope kind of shifts to have like a larger look at surrounding society, and maybe explore some of the underbelly of the Soul Society and some of the issues, the very blatant issues that are all over the series. I mean, Mairi is one of those main characters. Mm-hmm. I would love for it, because the stage is set to explore some of those things, and maybe to even reform in some regards. If balance has been broken, that suggests that it has to be rebuilt and remade if they want to continue living normal lives. That kind of has to happen by the end of it. So I think it provides the perfect stage for that kind of thing, where I don't think that was really needed, or I don't think that was necessary at all in the main manga. That's a big issue a lot of people have with Bleach, which are understandable for some reasons. But I don't think that was ever promised or was ever necessary in the main story. But here, the stage has kind of been set for that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Literally, the premise of this arc is that the Soul Society have been sending their comrades, their loved ones, to hell, because they're that fucked up. The system is that messed up, that they were doing this unknowingly. So I feel like there's sort of a demand to explore those things to a greater length. So that's one thing I'm very excited for. But in general, I kind of don't want much Ichigo. I do want more Ichigo. I mean, he's my favorite character by a landslide. I adore him. But I don't want him to be the main focal point. Whether it's Kazui, whether it's an ensemble cast sort of situation. If it's like 1,000 Year Blood War, then that's fine. Because 1,000 Year Blood War, Ichigo kind of does take a backseat for a majority of it. If it's like 1,000 Year Blood War, I'd be open to that. But something I've one idea I've entertained is that the rescue arc formula is flipped, and Ichigo is the one that needs to be rescued, and we see Shinigami, Arrancar, Fullbringers, all of them coming together to rescue Ichigo. I've kind of entertained that idea. That seems like something Kubo would do. Yeah, that sounds very Kubo to me. But in general, I want more from Kazui, bro. That cheeky little devil intrigues me. I need more from that kid.
Same,
I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know if we're just being like a friend of mine compared him to Gon, actually. They have this kind of like innocence and curiosity that, you know, unchecked can turn into something more worrying.
100%.
Gon is one of my ghosts, so that's very exciting. And the one thing I want more than anything, even more than the potential of like a Shunsui Ukitake or seeing Unohana again, or all these crazy things that we are likely to get, I want to see Ichigo and Orihime as parents.
Yes.
I even not necessarily together. I just want to see how they handle that. I want more, a bit more downtime, a bit more slice of lifey moments, a bit more like just seeing them happier, and also just seeing them as parents. Like Ishin as well. I'd love to see him in like a grandfather role. Like that. I want more of those kind of like moments that because. It's tough because the stakes are already so high with how it started, so it's likely that we won't be getting a crazy amount of that. But that is one thing I do, just because Kubo is just so good at it. If he wasn't so unbelievably good at those moments of downtime, then I don't think I would want that much more of them. They're really scarce, but all of them are some of my favorite moments in the series. When we get moments where, when it's not active war. Of course, I love that about it. I mean, it's Bleach. 90% of it is like that, and it's one of my favorite stories. But I do wish we get some space for more downtime. That's one thing I really want from Hell.
Yeah. No, well,
but yeah,
dude,
I spoke a lot there.
Please, can we get like an Ichigo and Orihime visiting Kazui's school day, and it's just like the two of them being parents? Ichigo's gotta be in front of the class, you know, have an embarrassing dad moment. Please inject it. I need it, man. Go ahead, AJ. I'm sorry.
Bro, that would be amazing. Oh man.
I would love a lot of that too. I would love slice of life stuff. And just generally, I'm also with Fiji and not wanting Ichigo to be the core, like the focus. I would like him to be a bit more peripheral while still exploring him and him indirectly, directly. But I think the potential is absolutely insane. For I guess a couple of reasons I'll explain. But one thing that I really want from it is for things to shift and change in terms of the approach. In a lot of the ways that Fiji said. But what I find so enticing, there's obviously the potential dynamics of characters who have gone to Hell who could return, and then the potential face-offs there. But what I really like about this is like this is the ultimate karma for a lot of Soul Society, and like Fiji was saying, it's sort of like the buildup of the twisted darkness that's festered as a result of their, you know, negligence, immorality, whatever you want to call it. All of that's accumulated and built up into this, and it just feels like this insane karmic retribution coming down on them, potentially. And what that essentially gives a lot of these characters in terms of a conflict or something to confront is that they have to face up to what they've wrought. And to me, the ultimate thing you need for that is courage. So I think the best way, it's like it's all set up thematically for Aizen's final speech, and all that was displayed throughout the series that was contextualized with Aizen's final speech. It's all set up for that to be properly conveyed, expressed through all these characters, because I don't think for a character like Ichigo or Orihime, maybe Rukia, I don't know, for a few of the characters from the main series, they've shown their courage. But for a lot of the characters that I think will be affected by this, or may have to confront it, they'll have to show the most courage we've seen from them if these potential scenarios come to fruition. So I think it's just like perfectly set up for the ultimate display of that theme, of that main theme, in a way that is so enticing. And then just in addition to that, I have been reading Can't Fear Your Own Worlds. I just finished the first book a couple days ago, and I just love that there is so much untapped nuance and richness to the worlds. I just really love, like, kind of what Fiji was saying, just spending your time with these characters. There was a lot of that in the first Can't Fear Your Own World book. So I just think that there's so much richness to be explored that isn't necessary, but given that we have the option, I would love it. So that's I guess a lot of my main thoughts on the potential of Hell Arc. And now that it's the sort of thing where when I finish the series, I probably wouldn't have thought that much about this potential, but now that Kubo just shadow dropped that and then disappeared, it's something I want really, really desperately. So I hope it comes to fruition.
Yeah, I love so much of what both of y'all said. That's a lot of what both of y'all said is exactly why I love the original 366 episodes. My favorite thing about that version of the anime is all of the filler. Actually, I've gone back to the filler so much because the filler not only gives us a slice of life, awesome moments with that are so scarce in the manga, but they also give us little bits and pieces into underbellies, like Fiji was talking about, certain things that could be flipped on their head, certain ways of exploring Soul Society, as well as a little bit of looking into the world, like AJ said, with like the Zanpakuto arc and things of that nature. And I feel like being able to do that from Kubo's perspective within the manga would be a really nice way of exploring that. And obviously, like AJ was just talking about, a really cool way of potentially looking at how certain characters would have to confront things they never confronted before and really challenge their courage. And I really love a lot of those potential ideas. And one thing that Fiji actually brought up to me, this is actually perfect segue for this, is the abundance of fights in the series and the lack of downtime. What do both of you think about that? The positives and the negatives that can come of something like that, being the main source of your story, while at the same time you're so good at doing one thing. Even though we love, like Fiji was talking about earlier, we love the fights, we love the Goat Raw Fire and Peak, but he's so good at those intimate, personal, downtime moments that like Here to Stay just represents so well as a soundtrack.
Man, yeah.
How do y'all feel about the balance of that within Bleach, and potentially how Kubo could play with that in the next arc?
I have so many thoughts on this. So I think it's I think there are times where it's definitely a bit of a problem, but for the most part, I think it's one of the series' biggest strengths, because, well, fights in Bleach are like volleyball in Haikyuu, or it's the method in which the bulk of the story is told. And one thing about Bleach fights that I really appreciate, and that's very integral to this working, is just how different they can be. When it gets down to the actual fight mechanics, they might be quite similar, but because Bleach fights are just these conversations between characters, they're like these theatrical performances is how I like to view them. Yeah. And because the characters can be so diverse and varied, a lot of fights are very different. Like going from Mayuri versus Zayo straight into Kenpachi versus Noitoro, those are two completely different fights. One is wacky, zany, over the top, eccentric. It's like, it's Mayuri and Zayo. And then the next one is Goat Raw Fire, but it's also laced with this kind of darkness and tragedy and sadness. So even though you have two fights back to back, and that could very easily be reduced to, oh my god, it's 20 chapters straight of just fighting, there's so much going on within them. Like fights is just the stage for the story to be told. Like in battle shonen communities and that kind of like anime spheres in general, people do look down on fights as a method of storytelling pretty oftenly. So that is something that is a hard sell for Bleach, and it has made people not like the series or struggle to get into it. But I think it's done really well, like 90% of the time. I do think there are areas where there can be more downtime, but I've also it's kind of funny. If you look at all the light novels that have been made, right, there are all the light novels that have been made are in those moments where the downtime Kubo like deliberately skips over. So you have the Honey Dish Rhapsody during the 1 week time skip that takes place right at the end of Soul Society. You have the obviously Spirits Are Forever With You takes place during the time skip between Arrancar and Fullbring, but there's also The Death Saves the Strawberry, which is Rukia's point of view of trying to, save the strawberry. Then there's Can't For Your Own World. Like, all of these novels, We Do Not Always Love You, all of these novels take place in those moments. Kubo is like very deliberate about it. It's a very conscious choice not to draw those things, and we know he's very good at it. So I question why that is, and like what that does for the story. And for the most part, I think it's like a tone and atmosphere thing, more so than just him wanting to rush past these things, because he has the time, especially early on. End of Soul Society, there would have been nothing to stop him there to just dedicate 3 or 4 chapters. But straight after Aizen's defeat, he only gives it 2 chapters of aftermath, and the start of that first chapter says 1 week later, and that 1 week is in a novel, in a light novel. So it's an interesting thing. I do wish we had more downtime. I think more downtime could have done wonders for some characters and some story beats. For example, the Vizards rejoining the Gotei.
Yes.
I think in general, the end of Deicide is like the most perfect stretch in the story to me. But the aftermath of the Arrancar saga, it's such a tough one. It's so hard because you have to pick and choose what you want there. Like, as a storyteller, what decision do you make there? Do you stick with Ichigo going into Fullbring? That might be the better decision. Honestly, I can't tell you. It's sticking with Ichigo and his point of view and his perspective and cutting straight into Fullbring and just giving us this character piece for the next 30 or so chapters before reintroducing the Shinigami with his powers returning. Or do you cut away from Ichigo for a bit after that fight and give us some stuff on the peripheral characters? It's such a difficult decision because both of them have their pros and cons, So I think for the most part, Bleach is the Ichigo show, and that is reflected in the structure and these sort of decisions. But in saying that as well, you have a lot of these fights where, like the start of Fate Karakura Town has the lieutenant battles. But looking at those fights as well, I think one pitfall that you can easily fall into is to look at them in a vacuum. If you're looking at Yumi Chika versus Charlotte as just Yumi Chika versus Charlotte, you're not going to get too much away from that. But if you look at it in the context of Squad 11 and how that ties into Kenpachi and or just how it ties into just the Gotei as a whole, you're going to get a lot more from it. So yeah, that's one thing. But the last thing I'll add to this, and this is where I actually have an issue with it, is that I do think Bleach fights mechanically can sometimes be a bit uninteresting. I don't think that's really Kubo's forte. Not a huge issue, because for the most part, I read it for the characters. I read it for the incredible character work he achieves through those fights and through certain decisions through the fights and mechanics of the fights. But sometimes I feel like fights can be lacking in strategy or can be lacking in just a much like crazy thought that I like. Like something like a JJK or Hunter x Hunter will give me that. You don't get much of that in Bleach. But once again, even saying that, there's a caveat, because if you read a Kisuke fight or a Mayuri fight, or there's some characters where that is present and it's really cool. So, and where it isn't present, it's usually not in the character's nature to go about it like that. Like Ikaku isn't gonna be, coming up with, he's just a brawler, like, so it's everything I'm saying, there's kind of like a caveat to it. There's kind of, there's small criticisms I have, but there's also counterpoints I've developed from just rereading the story so much and being a glazer at heart. So yeah. Yeah. I said a lot there. Sorry.
Oh, no, bro. I loved it, man. I appreciate you. Thank you, AJ.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think that, by and large, my thoughts on the series' clear focus on fights is that there are definitely points at which I feel like I do wish there was a couple chapters of downtime or something. Sometimes it can be a little exhausting, or like Fiji talked about how stylistically, what's one of the series' greatest strengths is that it, from fight to fight, it varies things up in terms of subject matter or tone or style. And the vast majority of the time, that's very true, and it keeps things fresh and it keeps things engaging. Once in a while, if there, like, it doesn't happen often at all in the series, but once in a blue moon, there has maybe been 2 thinner fights with less interesting characters to me back to back, and in that point, I get a bit weary, I guess, and I feel a little more disengaged than I would otherwise. But so it's definitely not perfect, and there are definitely downsides to it. But by and large, I am so glad that it is the way it is. What I say this a lot in terms of the way I personally experience stories is I just experience them. I have a gut reaction to it, and then after the emotional gut reaction, I try to sort of put together why I felt that way. The vast majority of Bleach is me gushing about it and loving it and being so impressed at the character work and symbolism and visual imagery and subtext and all of that. And it's only after talking to people where it's like people complain. I was told that people complain sometimes or criticize that Bleach has an overabundance of fights, and I get why that's a complaint, because it definitely it's all there. It's all there. There are fights everywhere. But I think what stopped me from really addressing that off the cuff, or sort of realizing that fact in the moment when I'm experiencing these fights, is just because it's all so multifaceted. There's so much there in each fight. And Fiji kind of alluded to this as well. If you are really trying to explore the series and explore Kubo's intent and get as much out of it as you can, then I think you're so lost in and immersed in all the character work and all the implications and all the symbolism that I just never even really addressed the idea that, holy crap, there's a lot of fights. Because I'm just like, okay, Byakuya has this insane Bonkai that seems to cage him. Okay, what the hell does that mean for him? What does it mean for his ideas about Rukia going forward? Oh, okay, here's another fight. And then this gives me something with someone else. So I don't know. My mind is just, as I go through these fights, my mind is just constantly attaching itself magnetically to these amazing ideas and amazing character bits and amazing character writing that it almost, it's strange to say, but it almost doesn't even feel like I'm reading fights after fights after fights, just because there's so much going on, and it's told through the framework of communicating through fights, but what I take away from it is so much more than a fight. It really helped for me, I think, that all the fights were so rich with so much stuff going on. If they were a bit thinner, even just like, I don't know, 10%, 15% thinner, and with less stuff going on, it probably would have been more tiring to get through, or I would have felt like it might have been a bit one-dimensional. But because they're so dense with stuff, and my brain and my heart are always grasping onto something new with every new chapter, this sort of creative stream of consciousness in shonen manga celebration form, it never, well, okay, like I said, there are a couple of problems, but the vast majority of the time, I never had any problems with it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I wouldn't even want Kubo to try to polish off the rough ends because of maybe what might be lost in the process as a domino effect. So yeah, I'm in love with it personally.
I really appreciate what both of you said, because it sort of leads into the overall discussion point that has become a meme at this point, but it truly was the overall community sentiment for a long time, which is that the series falls off after Soul Society, right? A major discussion point that could have a myriad of different factors, and I'm very interested in hearing both of your thoughts on that idea, that concept, why it exists. Now that I just call it AJ Kubo. That must that's got to be one of that's got to be, I think, the biggest. I've glazed AJ a lot. I don't think I've ever glazed him that much. You know what I'm saying? shout out to Kubo AJ. Well, we all know Ichibe's Kubo, but on a serious note, talking about the overall reception and idea that the series falls off after Soul Society is so fascinating to me. Obviously, we all have our different ways that we experience the story and have communicated with its community and been a part of that community. But I'm interested in hearing y'all's thoughts on this now that we're talking about fights and Bleach in regards to how it handles that and the positives and negatives of that, because I do think that has a little bit of a lesser part to do as to why people prefer or not why people, why that stigma was on the series for so long that it falls off after that point. Because I personally do believe that the major reason why that is because the original 63 episode anime focused in on that particular section of the story, and it did its best to just stick to that, right? Whereas the rest of the series, as much as I love the filler, and I just talked about how much I love the filler in this series, the Arrancar saga truly does not only just break apart the thing where if you watch it even with that filler, even without the filler, it feels like it could be dragging on, or it definitely doesn't have the same intensity, or it doesn't feel like it has the same intensity as Soul Society when you're watching it in the anime. Whereas in the manga, what I've noticed, especially within the past 10 years since the series has ended, is that most of the time, individuals who go from Soul Society to Arrancar to Fullbring and Thousand Year Blood War in the manga don't come out of it with that same sentiment. It feels like it's an anime-only sentiment. But even within that discussion, it's peeling back the layers of, okay, then why do they feel that way? Why was that such a strong sentiment with the series? Is it the intensity of Soul Society and the focus that, similar to how in One Piece, its most praised stretch is the singular focus of a narrative based around saving a single individual that makes it so easy to not only just get invested, but it makes cliffhangers and the normal Western way of looking at television and storytelling of like, okay, cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger, so that we can keep going, and that makes you feel like, oh man, you're experiencing something extremely peak, which you are. But whereas something like an Arrancar saga, a Fullbring, or a Thousand Year Blood War really requires a lot of the introspection. So I'm curious as to how y'all feel about that discussion, because I do feel like it could lead into what we were just talking about with the fights and stuff. I'll start off with you, Fiji.
Yeah, I have a billion thoughts on this, but I want to say one thing about anime versus manga you just brought up. Just a small point, but it's a big presentation thing, and it's a reason why I think things can feel more dragged out. Like, obviously there is some terrible pacing in the anime because it was a weekly serialization at that time period. It's tough not to have something with big pacing issues. But one thing is like a visual thing. This is where the white backgrounds and the lack of backgrounds that Kubo can be memed for sometimes really comes in clutch, because with Ichigo versus Okura, you're looking at them same pillars for like 15 episodes. It feels like no progress has been made, whereas with the manga you don't really have that sense, because that's not what the art is focusing on whatsoever. It's very zeroed in on character, facial expressions, and body language, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's just a small point I wanted to bring up. But Soul Society, I think when it comes down to it, one thing that Soul Society has that other arcs also have, but not to the same extent, is it has such a clean plot. It has a very, very tight, clean plot. It's a masterful plot. Like, I'd say the only area of the story that is better plotted is the first invasion, which are up to from 480 to 542. Soul Society has its A plot, Ichigo saving Rukia, and it has its B plot, which is the Aizen murder mystery with Toshiro as that protagonist of that. And it's just so clean. Every chapter feels like it's making progress in terms of plot. Sometimes you'll get into a fight. Like, the only time where you're in a fight for more than 3 or 4 chapters, it's an Ichigo fight. And that's the main character. So that's kind of expected. And that also ties into something else I want to say, is that one thing AJ praised the story about earlier on is that it can be quite unconventional. And I think that isn't really true for Soul Society. I think Soul Society is just classic shonen. It's the classic shonen formula done amazingly well. I'm not even saying this as a dig to the arc. It's phenomenal. But that's one thing about it. I don't think Kubo really... There's definitely quirks and there's definitely elements of what Bleach eventually becomes, but he's not really, found his style just yet. He hasn't really fully discovered himself as a creator and an artist. So that's another thing with it. And of course, there's also a sense of novelty to Soul Society, and this ties into what I was saying earlier with the fights and how writing things a certain way wouldn't be true to the characters, like having fights be strategic when the characters just aren't those kinds of people. Above all, Kubo, he is adamant on being honest and true with his depictions of these characters. And the Soul Society arc introduces us to a society and a community of characters that have these interpersonal dynamics, that have these relationships, that have this kind of, they all know each other, they spend time with each other. You feel like you're meeting that kind of group. But then you go into Arrancar and they're like the polar opposite. The Hollows are all, they keep to themselves. So you don't have that same kind of group dynamic that, the Shinigami gave you. It's a very different take on a group when you get into Arrancar. And that's why they can sometimes feel isolated, and obviously that there's a synchronicity with the theming there that's just amazing, but that can also maybe get in the way of someone feeling entertained, I think. And the same is also true for the Quincy. Execution and the Fullbringers kind of bring it back to that Soul Society kind of style where they all know each other, there's some great group dynamics and whatnot, and there's a lot of on-screen interaction. A lot of Bleach's, best, a lot of the best moments I've had with Bleach is just thinking about something that isn't necessarily taking place on screen. And that's something that Kubo really digs into, and that's an element of Kubo's writing that really skyrockets post Soul Society. And I think in Soul Society it's just all there, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Both work for their own reasons. But yeah, I think Bleach does change, not considerably, but a noticeable amount post Soul Society. Not immediately. I'd say the first kind of section before Hueco Mundo is still pretty standard. It's not really a big shift. But as we get into Hueco Mundo, I think Kubo there's certain quirks and there's certain stylistic differences that make it feel different. So I do understand where the take comes from. I don't agree with it, but I do acknowledge a difference personally in terms of how the story is written. But yeah, going back to what I was going to say very quickly, there's a certain novelty with Soul Society. It's also the first time that the story has this kind of massive explosion in the cast, in the stakes, in the tone, in everything. We enter Soul Society, and everything changes. When we enter Hueco Mundo, it's like the same thing's happening again. It happens. It's amazing.
Right.
I love it. But it doesn't have that same novelty because we've seen Kubo do this before. And that's another reason why I adore Thousand Year Blood War, because it's like, they pull up on us. We're not going to them.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
just
right.
this complete surprise. Yeah, it's this massive surprise. But yeah, I've said enough on that.
No, I appreciate your thoughts, bro. Go ahead, AJ.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna glaze them even further. So go ahead.
Well, what my answer was gonna be was pretty much one of what Fiji said towards the end there, which is that we were talking about how unconventional and strange Bleach can be in the things it does, and that's why a lot of people who love it. But I think that that's way less present in Soul Society. And I'm not a historian about anime-manga. I'm very much wet around the ears with regards to the history of this, and you guys know much more than me. And so this is just an opinion. I have no idea if this is true. I could be totally wrong. But I think that, I wouldn't, or I'll put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised that if Bleach was written the way it's written in from that shift, so midway around Arrancar or wherever, I don't know that I think it would be as popular as it is, because I do think that it's what Fiji said. What Soul Society is just very traditional, and again, like Fiji was saying as well, this isn't an insult at all, but it feels very traditional. I was surprised throughout it at some of the developments, but I didn't really feel throughout Soul Society that this was super left field, or that it was something that would make me brain rot and think over some of these concepts in a way that Ichibe does, or Yuha as a character does, or Aizen's conclusion does. So I think Soul Society gives you, generally as an overall experience, a peak traditional shonen arc. And I think that is something that vast populaces would latch onto and would love. And then so when it subverts that, and when it goes more experimental, which I'm so glad that it did, but by its very nature, when it gets more creative like that, when a series gets less traditional and more creative and more and innovates more, it is going to isolate people who came to it because of that generalizability. And I think that's probably what happens with Bleach, at least to a certain extent. I'm sure there are a lot of factors, but I think that's part of it too. Because, for example, I don't know. I've seen people that really, really dislike, at least comparative to me, that Aizen. I joke. I have joke a lot of the time about Aizen being like this loser. He's kind of a dork. He's kind of like a Redditor sometimes, because he all the time wants to prove he wants to prove himself to be above other people, and he gets so caught up in this sort of aspirational complex of his, that the beatdown that he gets at the end of Arrancar was always going to happen. It had been coming for ages, but the end of Soul Society, he ascends to godhood, and he is just this overwhelming godly power that it's like, oh my god, this is Sephiroth. He's going to be a series-defining force that is constantly going to go toe-to-toe with our characters, and hopefully we'll beat him at the end because he's the villain. But I'm sure that when he ascends to godhood like that, people don't expect him to get this insane beatdown at the end of Arrancar. I'm sure people don't want, a decent amount of people don't want that to happen to this pinnacle of impressiveness that we see at the end of Soul Society. I adore that. I think Aizen is elevated a ton by what happens at the end of Arrancar, and I think he's a better character for it. But it appeals to less people for being a better story, in my opinion, or a story truer to what Kubo wanted to do, and I think that's just a byproduct of that. I really do think that, again, I'm uneducated in this, so I could easily be wrong, but I do think that if Kubo had the approach that he had when things started getting experimental from the beginning of the series, I don't think it would be that popular as it is. Which is why partly why I'm glad that he had this evolution, because I'm so glad that Soul Society and Substitution Igami exist as they do, and then we saw things evolve. But yeah, that's my best guess at it as someone who's become acquainted with the series like just in the past year.
I would say you're kind of spot on. I would say you're kind of spot on with that. I would also say though the coolest thing about the evolution is that reading Soul Society on your first reread is like reading a completely different arc.
Yes.
It's insane.
I bet.
Man. It's so like there's so many moments you look at knowing where it ends up and just knowing how things shift, and it's just like holy, this is crazy. He did such a good job with that shift. It's so seamless.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Fiji, because that was going to be one of the things I wanted to bring up. Because, when I first joined communities in general, the first thing I ever saw, the first two communities I was ever a part of whenever I joined like the online space as a kid, were the WWE and Final Fantasy VII communities. And I remember reading on the forums how much quite a few individuals did not like, or did not look as fondly on the post-Midgar stuff of FF7. Because Midgar is what everything had been pointing to. And I like what Fiji was talking about in regards to progress. Like when most of the time, or I would say for almost anything, you like feeling progress. You like moving through something and feel like it's meaning something. It's going towards something. And Soul Society does such a phenomenal job of not just making it feel like there's a lot of progress being made, but also that everything is leading towards a point where it's all going to explode. And so when it starts exploding, it doesn't stop, and it's all gas, no brakes. And like Fiji said, you look back on it on reread, and you see how masterfully everything's woven together, and how everything is so well plotted out, and you get to see all of these not just great moments that would forever define the genre, but even just the first time experiencing it, you're like, sweet mother of flatters, I can't stop reading, man. I can't stop watching. And so it's genius. It is a phenomenal first act, the same way that Midgar is. And I think what's so interesting about both of those series is how FF7 would not be what it is without that Midgar section, and then what comes after completely changing it. And they're both FF7. The same way that Soul Society and everything that comes after is still Bleach. It's just Kubo finding his way. It's like Sorachi at the beginning of Gintama. It was all one-shots. He was trying to find his way. He wrote short story after short story after short story. And finally, he wrote Benizakura. And then he was like, okay, I like this a little bit. Then he wrote Mitsuba. Then he started writing a Fuyo and a few of the others. And then finally, during around the Fordeva stretch, he found the Sorachi style that would define him until this very day, which is like the unpredictable nature of one shot, emotional story, serious arc. One shot, whatever it is, right? Like that loop. That's also what Kubo found. That's what JoJo found in Part 3. That's what Oda found after East Blue. It's like all of these artists, we get to see how they evolve and how they find their style. They find themselves. They find the story. Like they allow the story and the characters to come to them. And I feel like that's just so cool to see with Bleach, because I value all four. All four arcs to me are extremely special in Bleach. All four sagas for very different reasons. But I value Soul Society so much, to credit what both of you guys were saying, because it reminds me so much of why I love the Dark Tournament in Yu Yu Hakusho. The Dark Tournament in Yu Yu Hakusho does nothing out of the ordinary. It did what Toriyama or any of the other ones had been doing for years way before Togashi. But what Togashi did with Dark Tournament was take everything that he had learned in his own experiences and apply it to something that everybody had been doing, which is a tournament arc. And what Kubo did is take all of his experiences and everything that he'd found interesting and the entire story up to that point to write a rescue arc that felt like it was something you hadn't seen before, or it was something that even if you have seen it before, it's like it's not like this. You know, you're feeling it, you're in the moment.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about that, going back into the history, is while this arc was going on weekly, it was causing so much of a commotion, similar to whenever Toriyama was writing his series, that through happenstance, and I'll get to the Aizen thing in a moment, because I think that's actually really interesting to what AJ was talking about. But it's so interesting that Kishimoto and Oda then followed up with their own rescue arcs right after this. So it's like there was this thing going around of, oh, this is interesting, this is fresh, this is new. Right, like I've never really seen something like this before within the anime and manga space. And so then you get the Sasuke retrieval arc, then you get the Enies lobby, and you're like, holy flagnars, man! All this peak happening because everyone's so creatively inspired right now. And I honestly do feel, I think the plan for Aizen's downfall was always the same, but I truly feel that when Kubo read Togashi's P2 and Gon stuff, I think he might have been like, yo, I'm doubling down now, baby. I gotta cook. You know what I'm saying? Because I truly feel
it's crazy.
I truly feel that he must have saw what Togashi did there with Gon and Pichu, was like he gets it. Like, yes, that's what I'm trying to do. And I feel like the same way Kishimoto and Oda were inspired by Kubo whenever they did their rescue arcs, he must have done the same thing, where it was like, oh man, even though this has always been the plan, just like I never doubt that Kishi's plan was not that, or that Oda's plan was that, I'll never know. But what's so interesting is how things come of your surrounding influences. And I don't know if we would have gotten Dayside if it wasn't for that Gon Pitu stretch. I thank God I don't have to think about what would have happened had that happened, but it did happen. And it's so cool how whichever one, regardless of who inspired who or whatever, they both exist, and they exist in a way where we can just be in awe of how things influence one another, maybe even subconsciously. And I love Soul Society arc for that reason, because of what it did for the genre at the time, what it did for Shonen Jump magazine, what it did to my other favorite series, and obviously how Kubo then, by writing something that obviously was so classic and so defining to Shonen Jump as a magazine, but then he went out and found himself and his style, but they are both Kubo at different points in his life. And I love it, man. I love how Bleach is a constant evolution on that. It's a constant discussion point on where Kubo is at that point in time in his life. And so it's just, I love talking about this, because I think it is important when looking at where certain series fall off for some individuals, because I feel like it is valuable to, especially as someone who's writing a story, seeing where things maybe don't mesh with people as much in this regard, but we can't disregard what comes after, because what comes after is, like AJ talked about, what makes it so special. It's that FF7, like I talked about earlier, is not FF7. It's not what it became, the cultural phenomenon that it is, if it's not for that double sides of a Midgar and what comes after. Same thing with Soul Society, and then this. It's all a part of that greater package. It's all a part of what makes that. And so I thank you both for your points there. Excellent stuff. As we wrap up here, obviously I wanted to circle back to looking back on the thing that I think maybe all three of us having as one of the major things that we value the most, up there with other elements. I know how much Fiji values presentation in regards to the overall aspect of Bleach, and you can most certainly cook on this in regards to this topic. But I wanted to ask you guys in regards to characters. I know we've talked about a few of them within this discussion, but I want to ask you both about Ichigo. What makes him such a great main character for this story, as well as what made Byakuya such a great antagonist for Soul Society? What made Aizen such a great antagonist for the Rancor Saga? What made Ginjo the perfect antagonist for Fullbring? And what made Yuha the great final thing that brings it all together? Cook as much as you want on that. I'm interested in picking your brains in regards to Ichigo as a protagonist and how the dynamic plays with those four as the series progresses.
Yeah, that's heavy. there's so much. That's Bleach in a nutshell. I feel like Ichigo and his dynamics with those antagonists are, that's heart and soul of the series. I think what you brought up with those four antagonists ties into what makes Ichigo a great protagonist, though, because that's the thing with him, is that he is simultaneously just a regular schmegular kid who wants peace and quiet, who just wants to be home. Like the end of series Ichigo, we see him just chilling at home, watching Chad on television with his friends. That's his ideal. That's his dream. He wants nothing more than just peace and quiet. And of course, there's more nuance to it than just that. It's not that simple. But at the core of it, I do think he just wants a quiet life, and he wants to be around his loved ones. But he also has this part of him that has a love for battle that comes from the previous thing I just mentioned. It's born from his desire to protect his loved ones. He has this desire for battle and to be stronger than his enemies, so he can feel confident in protecting his loved ones. He also has these doubts in him. He also has these trust issues, like a Ginjo. He also has this relationship with his sisters, like a Byakuya. He also has this incessant fear of death, and he also, like, that's traumatized him from day one, like a Yuha. So he is both just a regular guy, and he's also so much more than that. He's such a multifaceted character, and all of those antagonists thrive because they peel at these different layers of him, and they expose more of who Kurosaki Ichigo is, and how he grows over the course of the series. Like you think of Aizen and who he is at the end of Soul Society, and you think of Ichigo, and you're not gonna really think of a dynamic there. You're not gonna think of similarities between the two. But then over the course of the Arrancar saga, he sort of develops things. Of course, there are things about Aizen that tie into Ichigo prior to the start of the Arrancar saga and his childhood and loneliness and that sort of thing. But there are things about Aizen that Ichigo that are very like crucial to their dynamic with each other that weren't there or weren't exposed to the reader just yet at the start of the Arrancar saga, and we see them develop over the course of the Arrancar saga. And the same can be said for Yuha. The same can be said for Byakuya, and that's something I love. They expose layers of Ichigo, and they showcase his growth. And like I said earlier, it's the Ichigo show. So all of these antagonists are ultimately tools to expose parts of Ichigo. It's kind of vagabond in that sense. That's one reason why I pair the two stories in my mind. It's like every character in Bleach, not every character, I think that's a bit too extreme, but it would be true for Vagabond, but almost every character sort of exists for Ichigo's sake, even if not directly, even in a roundabout sense. There's some way, whether it be tangentially or something direct, where it makes Ichigo a better character, or it develops him or fleshes him out further. And those antagonists are the most direct examples of that. And Ulquiorra is also part of that lineup, I'd say. And Grimjo. Sure. And Grimjo. And Tsukishima to a lesser
honestly,
extent.
everyone he fights. Renji, Kenpachi.
Yeah, all of them. Kenpachi arguably the most out of them all, Yeah. So it's everywhere. I feel like there's so much more to say on that, but I'll let AJ go and maybe help me think of more things at the same time.
Well, I'm pretty much in agreement with the core of what Fiji said, and I immediately found myself so attracted to and endeared to Ichigo from the beginning, because I think it's clear that he is damaged and he is traumatized even before we get the Memories in the Rain flashback to show the core of it all. But what he essentially is, like Fiji said, a regular kid. He's not perfect. He has some flaws, but overall, I think he's a regular, good kid who's very likable and endearing, and you generally want to succeed, who is burdened with an incredibly deceptive and complex, a deceptive burden of trauma that manifests in like the most complex way possible. using the metaphysics in the world and all that's going on in his mind and all of that. And so he has the most multifaceted psychology, and you need to peel back these layers and undo these knots and go through so much to get to the heart of it so he can unearth himself and self-actualize and go forward in life and move on. And Kubo does an amazing job to make him likable and endearing so that you want him to do that and so that you're proud when he does. Arguably, the moment of the series for me was The Blade Is Me, where I felt such pride in him, like he was my little brother or something, you know? But what I like about the antagonists is, as Fiji said, they reflect him, and because he is so weighed down by such a multitude of so many different things, I feel like each dynamic, whether it be minor or major, tugs at a string that then undoes all these knots, this cluster that weighs him down, which gave him the capability to properly understand himself, realize who he was, and come to those realizations and be fulfilled in the end. So it's not what I really like each of them. Byakuya is going through, in a lot of ways, something that Ichigo is going through, a very similar thing. But Byakuya is unable to get past it, and he is only able to get past it after Ichigo communicates with him through combat. And so what I like about it, what I love about it, is that these are all battles that Ichigo is able to, a lot of the time, win and prove his combatant wrong and change their lives through that communication. But it's a give and take, because without the fight existing in the first place, I don't think that that Ichigo's burden would be lessened itself. I think he learns about himself through the fights and then reflects what he learns to them. So he has the perseverance to pull it out a lot of the time, even if he loses. I think it's, in the long run, something that represents great progress towards the end, even if in the moment it's a step back. And he has the perseverance to see all these battles through and teach the people he faces, the characters he faces, how to move past whatever they're struggling with. But without those battles, without that communication, without the dialogue in the first place, it wouldn't occur. He's not all-knowing. He doesn't have this within him. It's all stuff that impacts him externally that he learns and processes in real time. And it's just, I guess it's just his conviction and perseverance that allows him to see it through a lot of the time. But it's just really cool how I think, like, each dynamic, each battle unveils a little bit more, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment, even if there are regressions, that in the long run ultimately helps him to get through it all. Every little experience. And I think with Ichigo's arc, almost more than anything I've seen in fiction, at the culmination of it all, you really feel every step of it when he accepts himself and self-actualizes. And every little battle, every big battle, it all culminates. If anything were even a little bit different, I don't know that it would have happened in the way it did with The Blade Is Me. So I just think the series is Ichigo. It's formed around him, and that sounds kind of contrived on the outside, but it works so organically, and it's so human that I never once, anything regarding Ichigo, I never once had any problems with anything, and I thought it was basically perfect.
Sweet mother of flag.
Agreed. I'd also say with the give and take is. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just gonna glaze him. Go ahead. Go ahead.
With the give and take as well, it's like both characters are generally trying to fight to prove something for themselves. Like for example, Byakuya is trying to he is trying to have his own conviction and perseverance through what he's going through, and to stick to the promise he made to himself when his parents died, that he would never break the law again. But it's also like you say, Ichigo learns through the fights, but he also needs to win the fight in order to get through what he's going through. So he's discovering himself and saving himself in a way. And in later arcs, that's kind of flipped, where it's like there's a like against Aizen. I don't think it's as positive. Against Ulquiorra, it's definitely not. There's nuances to each of them to make them all feel unique. That corresponds with the part of him that's being peeled back. With against Byakuya, even there, I don't think it's particularly positive, because it feeds into some of his complexes as a savior. He told himself he had to win that fight in order for the rain to clear. He had to save Rukia in order to live with himself, and that's unhealthy. And the Arrancar saga is almost a response to that, with where that goes and how that culminates in the Ulquiorra fight, which is designed to be chock full of callbacks to the Byakuya fight. And there's so much interplay between all of these different antagonists and their showdowns with Ichigo, and how that ties into the overall construction of his character. So it's very difficult for me to talk about, because it's 686 chapters of peak. So it's hard to talk about in like a short form kind of discussion like this. But yeah, it just feels very deliberate, and it feels very complimentary, and just it all feeds into itself and builds upon itself, and just ultimately, like AJ says, just culminates in The Blade Is Me, and continues on a bit further. But like with the final battle, that's probably the most unique of them all, because it comes after the self-actualization and instead serves as this kind of test of who he is, and he momentarily fails, only for another part of his character that hasn't got much to do with those antagonists, but is also very core to him, in accepting help from his friends and the heart and all of that coming in, and that being the main thing, and how that ties into courage and everything. Is just it is hard. It's hard to talk about these sort of things.
No, dude, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was just about to ask you, just as a personal thing for me, I know how much you value chapter 684. Could you elaborate on why that is? You were just talking about like why that final stretch means so much to Ichigo's character, but why does that chapter in particular resonate with you as strongly as it does?
Oof. It's because it's the follow up to what I just said, right? It's like, so he's fighting Yuha. He's put everything of himself into this fight, and he is destroyed. And then he's picked back up by these connections he's formed, by Orihime, by Tsukishima, and then by Aizen. But then even that fails, and we get 684, where, I mean, Uryu is obviously central to it, very, very central to it, but I still like looking at that spread of him swinging the sword that is blatantly reminiscent of his OG sword. That to me, that's, the title is The Blade, or it could just be Ichigo. It could just be, the title could just be Kurosaki Ichigo. That chapter to me feels like the Fullbring moment where Rukia says it was his steadfastness that caused it was his immutability in a way that caused the immutability of Soul Society to be toppled. It feels like the perfect depiction of his character, just straight up in the most visceral, just in the ties into presentation. It's just like, it's just right there. It's past and present in one page. It's just everything to me. It's probably my most reread chapter of the series, just because going through it and seeing, the sheer just power and how terrifying Yuha is in that moment, where he's literally one with the surroundings, and he's just this overwhelming black consuming everything around him. But it's just like, he just won't stop, even as his sword is in the middle of cracking into little pieces, just keeps going. And because he made that swing, if he stopped as the sword was cracking, the sword beneath it wouldn't be uncovered. You know, it wouldn't have worked if he had stopped swinging, but he just didn't stop, and that was the only way to get through it.
I love that, man. Thank you for sharing that, because I know we've talked about how special that chapter is before, but I've always been curious as to why that chapter resonates with you so much as it does, and I appreciate you for elaborating on that. As we finish off here, number one, I wanted to say thank you to both of you, but number two, I wanted to ask how both of you feel about the current state of the Bleach anime as we transition into our excitement for the obviously the final core. AJ hasn't watched you haven't watched 3 yet, right, AJ? Like at all?
Just
Core
the first
3?
episode.
Oh, okay, just first episode. So the first 2 cores and the first part of number 3. Just how you feel about the present state of the anime, AJ, as well as maybe what you thought of the first original 366. You know, just your overall thoughts on the Bleach anime, and as well as for you, Fiji. But I'll start with AJ.
I'm really enjoying it. I guess the past couple of weeks or so, I've been doing a mix of watching some stuff live and then watching stuff on my own time, and just generally, I think it's a great adaptation, and I think because I hold the manga of Bleach in such reverence, and I don't think there was ever going to be a possibility of me not thinking of it as, of me not preferring the manga, I guess. Because of that, and because of me really loving certain creative decisions and really liking some sort of things that are less conventional, that are a bit more traditionally communicated or presented in the anime, there's when it comes to changes, there are certain things I prefer, and there are other things that I'm really glad were expanded upon. So when it comes to when it comes to departures or creative liberties or whatever, they can be, I think, by and large, it's a net positive for sure. But here and there, I find myself thinking less is more, or thinking that the context of a character or the tone surrounding a character I prefer in the manga. But I think that's going to happen whenever any adaptation tries to be a bit bolder and creative and courageous. So that's a given. By and large, I really, really enjoy it. The first core, I think, just from a scene-to-scene perspective, is incredibly well directed. I found myself really engaged the entire way through. Is everything totally perfect and super polished, and do I have no complaints at all? Of course not. But I think, all in all, it's the sort of adaptation that that any fan of any Shonen Jump manga would be really, really glad to have. And when it comes to certain changes, and when it comes to things that you might prefer, or in the anime or the manga, whatever, what's beautiful is we have the source. We have the source that's unchanged, that won't change, and we can compare and contrast. And I love that we live in a world where those sorts of things can be done. And hey, if you like it less in the anime, then there's the manga for that. If you like it better, then beautiful. In specifics, I really love the execution of a lot of and direction of a lot of the scenes. I think just there's great visuals throughout, especially Core 1. A lot of the fights are done really well. The voice actings, I'm thinking of characters like, how do you actually pronounce S-Node?
Ass-Node, just say Ass-Node, it's okay.
I say Ass-Node as a joke in my streams, and I never say his name right. Matsuoka's performance is honestly unbelievable for him, and elevates the character a lot for me. Even Natsuki Hanai as Gremmy, and the voice direction in general really stuck out to me, and elevated moments in certain scenes, like Komamura's stuff is, I think, it hit me more in the anime because of the voice acting. And just giving more context to Squad 0, who I thought
Yeah.
were cool in the manga, but I properly bought into seeing what they do, especially towards the end of Core 2 in the anime. So yeah, I'm a fan overall. I like a lot of what it enriches. It was a great time. I think it's a great adaptation, and I can't wait to check out Core 3, and then when Core 4 starts releasing, be checking it out week to week.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We'd love to see it. Fiji.
So with the anime, I feel like I've I've developed this kind of reputation as like a bit of a hater in just because I can be pretty critical of it, but that's usually in response to people treating it as a replacement or like flat out improvement to the manga, which I dislike that train of thought at all. But I love it for what Recon was talking about earlier, just the evolution of Kubo. This is Kubo getting to revisit his biggest, boldest arc 6-7 years after its completion in the manga, and obviously with all the things surrounding that, it's a blessing to have that opportunity, and to see it executed for the most part really well is just a blast. I will say, for the most part, like most of my favorite things are in Core 3, but I'm also mixed on it. I'd say my favorite core is the first one still. And that's a mix of just the content. I mean, it's the first invasion. It's hard to be better than that. It literally adapts 480 to 542. Core 2 has its problems, but for the most part, I really like it as well. And I love Core 3, even if I have my issues with that, but you obviously can't talk about that right now. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. When it comes to additions, I'm kind of on the same page as AJ, where some I think it can be a bit hit or miss sometimes, but for the most part, it's positive. Like for example, the end of Core 2 additions are just fantastic. We got. You know how much a Bankai means in the story when it comes to enriching a character. We got a Bankai for Senjumaru Shutara, so it's like that immediately takes the character up 10 spots in the rankings. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, there's so much there. The conversation between Yuha and Ichibe, but there are some very fundamental things that I am quite weary about. And I just need to wait and see the full vision. I need that fourth core to come and see how things are fully wrapped up. But to say without, because this wouldn't really be a spoiler, I think AJ's already seen some changes in this front. The depiction of Uryu and Yuhaba's characters in the anime is noticeably different. They're going for something different with the both of them. They're making them a bit more direct and... well, with Uryu, this isn't really the issue. With Yuha, I do take slight issue with that, but at the same time I just need to see where it goes. I can't really compare an unfinished product to what the manga is, because even with the manga, if we didn't have 686, then I might have had an issue with him being so enigmatic and so like having this like mystique to him all throughout, where he just seems incomprehensible, right? Until he's humanized in his final moments. Like that is so necessary. The final chapter, that final scene. Without that, I don't think I'd like Yuhaba anywhere near as much as I do. So I have to extend that same kind of thinking to the anime as well. I need to see where they're gonna take this approach and where it ends up. But for the most part, I am like cautiously optimistic, I'd say. I am just like I really want them to adapt some light novel stuff, like the Kanfei prologue. I think that needs to be in the anime. I feel like that's one thing where I'll say that should have been in the manga even, because it's obviously, it ties back to what I was saying earlier with the end of Aranka moving into Fullbring. It's kind of hard. You're trying to make a very big, bold ending to this 74 volume manga, so it's like, yeah, it's tough. To show like Aizen being sealed again and those interactions there, and obviously confirmation that Ichigo was meant to be Soul King, la-di-da-di-da. But it's something that I feel like an anime production would be able to integrate a lot more seamlessly than something like a manga. I feel like the medium is more built for that, and I'd hope to see them take advantage of that fact. In terms of like production value, I have my issues, but for the most part, I'd say it's really good. It's really good. I just feel like visually sometimes it can feel like they are, like, I'll say this, the original content to me, especially when it comes to fights, is generally the best looking stuff, the most creatively boarded or animated. And I think that comes down to the issue of them sticking so closely to the manga. They're very faithful to the manga when it comes to how they storyboard things, and like certain shots. It's almost 1-to-1 for some sequences. And I love the manga, but the manga works so well because it is a medium of black and white pages, and it's static. And Kubo doesn't dabble too much in choreography, so they don't have they don't have too much to work with. Like, if you read the manga, you'll see a lot of pages, even in fights. It's a lot of facial expressions, a lot of characters making certain poses and whatnot. But it's, in terms of actual hand-to-hand choreography, it's no JJK. It's not Naruto. They don't have a crazy blueprint to follow, and that can make some of the action feel very limited for me. But then you get the anime original fights, and it's like they're going off because they don't have a blueprint to follow. Like, the best fights, especially when it comes to Core 3, I'm not going to say anything, but the best fights are anime original stuff, the best fight sequences. So, yeah, that I do wish they weren't so insistent on being, like, 1-to-1 with the manga, but I guess having Kubo on the production doesn't help with that. Like, they don't want to disrespect the man or something. I don't know what it might be, but that's one little gripe I have with it. But for the most part, really good. I'm really glad it exists. Of course, for the resurgence it's given Bleach in general, that's enough of a reason to be happy for it.
That's right. Yes, sir. I'm glad you brought up that final point, because it reminds me of why it is that I appreciate the adaptation of Wano so much, because they said, F the blueprint that we got. We're going to do our own thing for almost every single fight, you know what I'm saying? Like, at least for the major ones, they and obviously it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times, but when it hits, that anime original, those fight sequences within Wano really hit, man. Like, it is super cool stuff. Same thing within the Bleach anime as well. But the Bleach anime, just to be brief, the Bleach anime obviously is extremely special to me. It's probably the one that I have the most nostalgia for, besides Dragon Ball. And obviously, looking back on that, I can't disassociate my love for the medium from my love from the Bleach anime. So it's really tough to look at it in any type of lens that's not that. But in regards to the 1,000 Year Blood War, speaking on what Fiji was just talking about with Core 1, that content, right, like what he was saying earlier, from 480 to 542, is so incredibly special to me, that having the Bleach anime back after 10 years automatically makes that first season potentially untouchable for me, because it's the combination of it being that stretch, as well as not having any Bleach anime content for a decade, and seeing all of that be displayed, having it be as good as it was, just maybe forever made it untouchable for me. I loved season 2, love season 3, looking forward to season 4. But man, I'm sure season 4 can do it, because it's going to be some absolute peak. But it's just the circumstances surrounding season 1 is going to make it very difficult to surpass for me. And I've gone back and rewatched that section so many times, from episode 1 to episode 12 or 13. It's a 1 hour special. So just incredible stuff. I appreciate both of you guys so much for being here and for taking the time. Fiji, I know that you're in the middle of cooking multiple different things in the kitchen, but where can the good people find you, and what do you have as like little sneak peek potential things for either Bleach or any other thing that you may be currently working on for the audience?
This is actually kind of pertinent. I just recently finished scripting my first ever Haikyuu video. I'm very excited.
Let's go.
So that's one thing. Very daunting series for me to try and talk about, because AJ's done such an incredible job already, and I also feel like it's just hard to tackle it from a new angle. I do pride novelty a lot, but I found an angle that I don't think many have touched upon before. So I'm excited to drop this video. And yeah, just you can find me on YouTube at Radman. Just Radman, you'll find me. It's a pretty unique name out here.
Dude, I'm actually
And also,
so
thank
excited
you very much for having me.
Oh, of course, bro. I how could I not have you on? You know what I'm saying? But this was
Hey.
the three brothers exchanging the sake cups discussion. You know what I'm saying? I needed to have the boys here
Drinking bleach.
for Bleach. Drinking Bleach, yes sir. So no, I appreciate you, and I'm so excited for the IQ video. That's gonna be super dope. AJ, man.
Hey, I hope so.
Over there on twitch.tv/Alexander, you can find him experiencing Peak and talking about Peak. But let the good people know where they can find you, as well as what the current schedule is looking like, bro.
I can't wait for that Haikyuu video. That's sick. So on Twitch, we're currently going through my yearly tradition of top 100 rankings for my favorite fictional protagonists, antagonists, and fiction in general. So next couple of weeks we'll be doing that on Mondays, Tuesdays, and as well as exploring the rest of Core 3 of Bleach. So that'll be for the next couple of weeks. After that, we and then there's always whenever Oda drops a chapter, we always do on Sundays a One Piece chapter read and review and discussion. But after that, we'll be starting. We'll be getting back to Death Stranding until I finish the game for that.
Nice.
So that'll be cool. And we'll be starting Steel Ball Run as the new
Let's go!
the new Wednesday manga. So I can't wait for that. I don't know how long Steel Ball Run is, but I imagine that'll take a little bit. It'll be Tokyo Ghoul after that, which I'm excited for as well. But yeah, that's the schedule for the next little while. And then as well on YouTube, with the help of Fiji, I'm getting a bit of a backlog of a bunch of videos for a lot of different series to release over the next little while too. So I'm excited for that. After the Rebirth video took me out of commission for a few months when it came to writing videos and putting stuff together, but we're ramping up again, so that's cool.
Let's
to see it.
go, man.
I need to read part 6 so I can join the Steel Ball Run streams.
Yes. Oh, bro. Fiji, man, if you ever want to talk about part 6 or anything that you're reading in JoJo, bro, hit me up in the DMs, man. I flip and love JoJo. So
100%.
I'll always be up for that. But no, yeah, man, once again, I appreciate both of y'all. Just another quick piece of insight. The next podcast discussion with AJ, still unsure of when that will be, but that will be where we talk about Trails, or we talk about Arcane, where we're going to talk about other pieces of greatness that we could potentially be experiencing that maybe we'll get farther in and before then. So it's going to be a fun discussion. Definitely look forward to that, and excited for what the future has. But until next time, hope everybody has an awesome one. Take care. This has been our discussion on Tite Kubo's finest work, as my boy King of Lightning says, the greatness of Bleach. And who knows, hopefully we'll be able to come back to this after Chapter 688 has come out, and we'll be able to discuss what took place there, right? So looking forward to that potential future. But until next time, y'all have a good one. Take care. Thank you so much.